I have had a chess.com account since I was 13 years old back in 2014. And since around 2020, in the past 5 years or so, from that chess boom, I have fell in love with the game and really taken improving much more seriously. And I have finally, after hovering around 17 or 1800 rapid for the past few years, I have finally broken 1900. And I'm going to show you the game that got me there. Now, will I stay there for very long? To be determined, but I am hesitant to even boot up a game because I don't want to ruin my new rating. But I'm currently 1906, and look at this. Played this game at 85.8% accuracy. We had one great move in there, and computer said I played like a 2250. Now, granted, I don't think my opponent played very well. You can see that by the computer's kind of evaluation of the game. But let's hop into it because I think it's a pretty good game. And I'm going to show you some variations in there. I'm not going to get too bogged down into the details. I'm going to try and keep it exciting and keep it moving. So make sure you stick around and see the end where I pretty much checkmate. Now, he does resign, but I do threaten a checkmate, and there's a few knight forks in there, so it gets pretty exciting. Let's hop in. This is a d4 opening. I play d5, and, bishop f4. Looks like we might get some kind of London, which, to be honest, I'm not too familiar with, because studying openings is hard, and I have not studied the London on either side, really. So I just kind of play normal chess. I develop my knight. He plays knight c3, which is already a bit odd because you normally don't want to block your c-pawn. It's usually going to end up on, c3 to create a nice pawn chain, or c4 to pressure the center. So blocking that c-pawn with the knight is generally not advisable. You're usually playing e3, knight f3, maybe bishop d3, and then like c3, knight bd2, and then that would support a later c4 or something like that. But instead, knight c3 right away. Okay, a bit odd. Now here, computer says, punish this immediately by striking in the center with c5. I instead play bishop f5, just developing. He plays e3, looking to get the light squared bishop out. And here I make a mistake. I know that he's playing a bit strange, and so I'm like, you know what? Let's strike in the center. But here's the problem. This is the wrong moment to do that because the knight can jump into b5. And c7 is a problem because it's threatened by the knight and the bishop, and also, this pawn is hanging, and I knew that when I played the move. I figured if he takes it, then, I just play e6, open up my dark squared bishop, so I'm either going to take that, or he defends it, wastes time, creates some weaknesses in his camp, and I'm just going to, develop some pieces, and then eventually, try and figure out this position, even though he's got some more space and an extra pawn, try and, break it up somehow, maybe play this, play in the center, but alas, that does not happen. Instead, he actually plays the correct move, which is knight b5, punishing me for being silly. So, what happens? I have to play knight a6 to protect the c7 square so that there's no funny business, and this knight on b5 just kind of lives there for a little bit. But I do a good job of mitigating the threat and not blundering anything. So, he plays knight f3, developing. I play e6 to get, my dark squared bishop out. Now here, computer says that white's correct approach is probably to play c3, solidifying everything in the center, also maybe opening up this light squared diagonal for the queen in some cases, and just, going that route. But, in this case, he could make me waste two moves with my bishop to develop, and then, he can just get a really nice position, maybe play this, b4 move at some point, and he's going to get the bishop out, castle. Also, he's threatening to kind of ruin my pawns by taking the knight if he wants to. So there's some unpleasant things going on. Also, I don't want him to take this bishop because that would split my pawns and I would lose my bishop pair. So a lot of nasty stuff going on that I would not have appreciated. But luckily, he didn't go that route. Instead, he plays this wacky move, a4. I didn't quite understand this in the moment. And I still don't understand it too much. It's pretty aggressive, it's active, it's throwing the pawn forward two squares, But here's the thing. What does it do? Can you explain to me the purpose of this move? And when phrased that way, it's kind of hard to determine. I wasn't trying to take the knight with anything. The only thing that I guess you could say is that No, you can't even say that. I was about to say like some queen check on a5 forking, but the knight is defended by the bishop already, so there's no reason to defend the knight and just throw a pawn forward. If anything, it weakens this b4 square, so if you do push the c pawn later, like to c4 or something, then the b4 square could be quite weak. So it's a very interesting approach. I just kind of develop my bishop because I figure, okay, let's get our king to safety, get the rook to the c file, open it up, maybe jump the knight into b4, or at least reroute somehow, and we'll figure it out. And he plays h3, just another waiting move with a pawn. Like, sure, it takes away this square, but I mean, there are other priorities. Your light squared bishop hasn't moved yet, your king is still in the center, and this threat is not really anything that I'm scared of at the moment. So I'm happy to see h3, because I can just castle. And now all of a sudden, I've got all my pieces out. Sure, the knight's not on the best square, and the dark square bishop isn't that active, but I mean, at least I'm developed. My king is castled. White doesn't have full development or castled king. So he plays bishop d3. I jump my knight into e4 because I see my lead in development, and I say, you know what, let's plug the center with a knight, throw it in there. If you want to take me, well, by all means, go ahead. I can take with the bishop, or I can even take with the pawn, and this pawn is very annoying. Sure, it kind of blocks off my bishop, but after the knight jumps in here, I can get my knight into b4, and then, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because this pawn is kind of a thorn, and it's not easy to get rid of. So that could have happened if he took. Now, jumping the knight in was not the best approach. It is apparently better to take the bishop first, and then white could respond by taking with the queen or with the pawn. If white takes with the pawn, you get nice central control. I can chop, take back with the knight, because you don't want to double your pawns like this in the center. It's not too great. So you would probably take like this, and then I could maybe give a check with the queen. And see, this is why I should have done this, because it could lead to a beneficial line for me. This is an example where we could get something like this. I give a check, taking advantage of the fact that the white king is still in the center, and computer says king e2 is best, because if you drop back with the knight, well, now you're kind of, in a sticky situation, because I can jump my knight in, I can even maybe pile up pressure on it, but now it's just d3 is kind of weak, and I could get my rook to the c file, and we could end up with something like this, where I get two nice pawns in the center, the queen can reroute, pressuring the king side, and the d3 pawn, which is quite weak, and a central pawn push is possibly coming, also the other knight coming in to threaten this, and just a lot of nasty stuff, maybe some funny business, right? So that could have happened, but it didn't. What happened instead? Well, I jumped my knight into the center, remember? White just castles and says, okay, whatever. And I close it down because I figure, you know what? I think I'm better here. I wasn't. Well, it's about equal. After this move, I'm not better, but I thought I was a little bit better because I have much more space. Here in this position, I have more space, really solid pawn chain, and his knight is a bit misplaced, not sure what it's doing. Now, here, white could do this, right? And if white takes the knight in the center, I take back, then, life goes on, and we just kind of play a position. I don't really have much attacking prospects, and the knight cannot jump into b4 now because the c pawn protects, and it's just a really close position. It's going to be some maneuvering, and eventually one side's probably going to get a pawn break somewhere or make a mistake, and it's going to be determined from that. But what happens instead is the bishop drops back, which is more passive, and now I am better because I've got the space, and I've got the activity, and I get the b4 square. That's the difference. You see, in this line, white is in time to play c3, and I don't get to jump into b4. But because they went back and retreated, the b4 square is all mine. And even though he can play c3, my knight can reroute back to c6, where it's more central, helping to support a later e5 push potentially, or maybe even jumping to a5 to b3, which happens later in the game. In fact, it happens now. Now, this was not the correct approach. Computer says take, and then play like a6 to kick the knight back, and then b5, expanding on the queen side, and just kind of going from there. It even starts throwing out like f3, knight d6, and stuff like this. But what I do instead is I see the hole on b3, and I decide I want to go for it. Now here, computer says white can get really aggressive with this g4, the center is locked, and he's actually got the pieces over here on the king side. So that would have been scary. But instead he plays f3, which is slightly less scary. I drop the knight back, and then he lunges out with g4. Now this is not as good because you push this f3 pawn. So your knight doesn't have that retreating square, your bishop does not see over here, and the king is just much weaker now because of that pawn push. So I drop the bishop back, he chops it, and he just decides to trade a whole lot of pieces. All the pieces. But now look at the position. Is it open or is it closed? Well, it's pretty closed. In fact, it couldn't really be more closed. We still have all 8 pawns on both sides. Now, center's closed, so which piece is going to be better? The bishop or the knight? Well, the answer to that is the knight, generally, in closed positions. And, I mean, you can see the knight jumping into b3 is pretty strong, and also this bishop is blocked by all the pawns and does not have great mobility. And the rooks, well, kind of not super important at the moment. But anyway, in terms of knight versus bishop, I'm happy to have the knight. I jump it into b3, and now his rook... Yeah, kind of uncomfortable because it can't go here, and it's got to either go behind the pawn, which is sad, or it's got to be on an awkward square like this. So the rook moves, and here I had a great opportunity to play this really strong move, e5. Just opening it up, saying, yes, I liked the closed position with the knight, but it's not fully going to explode the position, but I need to get to the king, and I need to open up some lines to do that, and doing this allows the rooks to lift, and I can even triple stack on this e-file, reroute my queen potentially, pile up on the pawn, and just get really nice pressure going here. Not to mention a potential knight c5 reroute. Or even like, I don't know, I'm trying to look at other stuff. I mean, like, all of this is possible in a closed position, right? So that could have happened. It didn't, because I did not come up with that idea. I looked at the move e5, but I didn't really see where it led. I thought, why would I do this? Because he's going to pile up pressure here on my d-pawn, and, he's going to somehow do that. But looking at it now, I don't really see how he's going to do that, because my knight controls the squares that would be required to, like, you would like to play this, right? And, like, pile up on the pawn, but unfortunately that would hang a queen. So, yeah, actually not too bad. But instead I play this and I go for expansion on the queen side, and this is fine. He plays f4 because he doesn't really know what else to do, so he just starts throwing pawns forward thinking, let me attack this guy, even though in the process, you're really opening up your own king. So I start opening stuff up, I chop. Also, this move just hangs a pawn. Let's not gloss over that point. When pawns move forward, they leave certain squares and pieces undefended. In this case, the e4 pawn falls. So that's pretty nice to me. And then he just keeps pushing. I mean, sometimes you just got to sit around and wait. Sometimes you just got to chill. Maybe even close it down further so that I'm not getting in. But he decides to get a little bit hasty and impatient. Also, look at the time. You'll notice he's still got 10 minutes. This is a 15-minute plus 10-second increment game. And by the end of the game, he's still got like 10 minutes on the clock. So that's just another annoying thing about playing rapid chess online sometimes, is that your opponent will just play very, very quickly, and you try to take your time and think and calculate and do the thing, and they're just playing super fast, so you end up just low on time, and you lose because of that, and it's just really annoying. But in this case, my use of time actually ended up paying off. So I start opening up the position. I trade a few pawns. Here I had the option to take this pawn as well, and I saw this far. So I saw that, if I take, then he's going to take with the rook, and then I almost win the rook, because in that line, this looks like a fork, right? But the bishop can block. So I saw that and I was like, I don't really see a follow-up. But this is actually pretty good still because you can get the rook, and this passed pawn is pretty strong. So even though, you know, he can open up the rook over here a little bit, there's no threats, the bishop is pinned, the rook is misplaced, and my pawn is rolling down the board. And we could get something like this where there's even this potential line where I can kind of sack the queen by pushing this pawn because I attack his queen. And then if he takes my rook, then there's a fork. And yes, I could win the rook, but there's also checkmate coming. So a lot of that could have happened. Meanwhile, this knight just sitting over here like an absolute boss, not even doing anything, but just controlling like this entire quadrant of the board. Look at that. Like, if you look at all of this, it's completely locked down, no mobility of the pawns. The rook is just like completely out of the game because this knight just came in here and devastated that entire part of the board. So anyway, let's go back. The king side is opening up. I decide to leave the tension there among the pawns because I was not afraid of this because I start getting into his king. So he starts opening up the queen side a little bit. Fine. He brings the bishop over, and I just start pushing my pawn because I wanted to open up the lines to the king, and the knight can now have an outpost here protected by the pawn, and the rook is just, you know, guiding the pawn to the promised land. So moves his queen. And why is this a blunder? Well, it's a fork. It's just a fork. Now, he almost gets out of it. He almost gets out of it by playing this because my queen is hanging, right? So if I take his rook, he takes my queen, and that's not good, right? So his thought is, well, he's got to take my queen, and then when I take, well, I didn't lose material. But the pawn marches forward, and you can't stop it. You can't stop it. You can't stop the pawn. Pawn is gonna become a queen. There's nothing that you can do to stop the queen. Because if you go here, well, I just queen anyway, right? So there's nothing. He sacks the bishop, check, and I'm up a piece. I push here because I'm weaving a mating net. I'm threatening checkmate. This would be mate. He takes the pawn, but that is actually fork number 2. We had an appetizer salad fork, and then we had the main course entree fork. And here he resigned because it's not really worth playing on at this point. You're going to be down a full rook. So great game, honestly. I mean, it looks like you can kind of counterattack my rook, but this is actually another check, and the movement of the knight actually protects the other rook. So that's a nice little touch there. But after this game, officially 1900 for the first time, which is really exciting, really good feeling. It means that, you know, I am getting a little bit better, and I'm hoping that sometime within the next couple of years, I can hit 2000. You know, online. Over the board, my tournament rating is not nearly this good. It's like 13 or 1400, but I don't play very often over the board. And also, those like 8-year-olds over the board tournament, in the over the board tournaments are just crazy. You play against an 8-year-old and they're like not even paying attention to the game half the time, and they're still just crushing you with like it's annoying. But what are you gonna do? All right, well, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you like this game, what your favorite part of it was, and maybe what you're looking to improve upon in your own chess game. I'd love to hear that as well. All right, well, I've rambled long enough. Have a great rest of your day, guys.